What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So today we've got something a little bit different for you guys because we're actually going to be showcasing concept art for champions which was done by official artists employed by Riot. And I think these are really cool because it gives us a lot of insight into the development of those champions by looking at the concept art and contrasting the differences with their finalized product. It allows us to think about what a champion could have ended up looking like, and sometimes that comes with some crazy implications that would fundamentally change how that champion acted in game. Just before we start, for those of you who are into Fortnite Battle Royale, we're starting a new Fortnite Moments channel where we're bringing you guys the best in high quality Fortnite moments, plays, highlights, and montages from the community. Check it out at the link in the description below. I think anyone who plays Fortnite would really enjoy the content. We're doing our best there. And for those of you guys who maybe aren't into Fortnite, don't worry, we're still keeping this channel League of Legends focused, while the Fortnite videos are going to be totally separate. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like on it or let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for some more videos. Our first scrap design today was an Urgot visual gameplay update concept by Christina Ness. Despite a lot of the community expecting to see Urgot's rework turn into something similar to the villain from the Echo Seconds teaser trailer, Christina's concept art shows us that Riot clearly had intended to keep Urgot as a machine with multiple crab-like legs from the start. The exact form of that machine body changed with each ideation, and we can see that some of Christina's concepts ranged from being quite thin and insect-like to heavier machinery like you'd expect to see on a mech. There were even quite a few ideations that featured tracks like those you'd find on a tank, so it was clear that Riot were just fishing for the right feel for their man-machine hybrid. Urgot's weaponry changed massively between concepts here too, with some featuring large cannons, smaller automatic weaponry, or even huge artillery pieces in some versions. There were also quite a few iterations on Urgot's electric meat grinder, so it seems like that his drill execution ultimate had been planned from relatively early on as a way to make him feel truly terrifying to play against. Christina Ness also handled the concept art for Taric's full-scale visual update, and although there's a lot less variations, you can see that Riot definitely wanted to put a lot of focus onto Taric's mystical armor. It's quite unlike anything else in the game, like the armor from Demacian or Noxian warriors, which makes a lot of sense given that his origin story takes place on Mount Targon. A lot of Christina's efforts seem to go into ways to make his equipment seem kind of ethereal, but of course a lot of attention also seems to have been paid on making his hair as fabulous as possible. At this point in Taric's full update, it seemed like Riot were pushing pretty hard to make Taric look quite different from his original form. For example, he doesn't seem to carry a shield and has a staff weapon rather than his original trademark mace. His hair also seems to look star-studded like that night sky, which definitely makes sense for a Targon champion, but it's clearly something that Riot decided against sometime after these concepts were completed. It's really interesting to see though, since it means Riot could have easily ended up turning Taric into something resembling a brand new champion, rather than sticking to the roots laid down by his original design. Our next batch of scrap designs are all by senior concept artists Riot Zeronis, and we'll be starting with Syndra. The original pitch from Riot to Zeronis about this new champion was pretty limited. Zeronis only had the code name Sim, and that she was intended to be an Ionian mage that could control gravity. You can definitely see aspects of Ionian design in these early ideation thumbnails, like having her own kind of twisted version of the Mantle of Decorum we see following Aurelia and Karma around. The designs range from being arcane to kind of futuristic, with some being dominated by sharp lines whereas others flow a little bit more naturally. Zeronis also created a few larger silhouette variations that look a lot closer to the Syndra we know today, but apparently these particular designs were rejected due to overlap issues and other technical stuff. They look a lot more detailed than a lot of the champion silhouettes from that time in Riot's history, so it's not surprising to see Riot toning them down a little to make them actually work in-game. Zeronis also handled the concept art for the Karma rework, and we've got 5 of the different directions that he initially took when trying to get the right feel for the update. A few of the concepts are quite generic Ionian designs, but all 5 borrow clear elements from the original Karma. Her fans and preference for elegant, flowing clothing can be seen in all of the ideations, and a couple of them also include the important Mantle of Decorum headdress that is a pretty important feature when it comes to designing respected Ionian characters. Although there are some seriously cool designs that build really well on top of the original Karma's appearance, they seem to have been rejected because they were maybe just a bit too flashy for her. Riot ended up with a much more simple appearance for Karma that places more importance on her visual effects, and it seems like it worked out pretty well, although some players would argue that a lot of her identity as a champion was lost in the process. Now our final Zeronis concepts for today are all for the Mad Bomber Ziggs, and unlike most of our other designs today, you can actually see a massive difference between the initial iterations and the later versions. Ziggs was originally known as Ivan the Mad Bomber, though his catchy smile and love of explosives were features that were preserved despite the race shift from human to the eventual Yordle. One of the key differences between the Ivan and Yordle concepts was that the initial designs were a lot more heavily armored. It definitely makes sense that having an explosive-obsessed character would take the necessary defensive precautions, but having armor on a squishy mage doesn't really make all that much sense, and it can be a little misleading in-game. Switching to Yordle definitely helped in this aspect, while also adding a lot more insanity and cheekiness into the mix that makes Ziggs a lot more lovable as a character than the original Ivan. And in fact, this original Ivan concept was split into the characters of both Ziggs and actually, in the armored section, Nautilus. So Ivan also did help contribute to the design of Nautilus later on, where they pushed the armored concept and then left the explosives to Ziggs. The Yordle concept also helped differentiate Ziggs a lot from already well-defined fantasy archetypes, since the concept of a heavily armored Russian explosives expert tends to be a little bit cliche and something that is kind of overdone. Next up, we've got a bunch of Shopkeeper concept art from Trent Kanuga, and there's a ton of diversity in these designs, so it seems like Riot gave Trent a lot of creative freedom actually. Concept pieces like these are called explorations, since it's essentially up to the artists to explore the different directions and possible designs for a character. So then Riot can look at all the different designs that the artist came up with and decide what works and what doesn't. The first set of explorations feature what appears to be a cat-like biped creature chilling on the head of a giant fish. It's pretty obvious that he's a shopkeeper since he's carrying a ton of weapons and potions and stuff and is surrounded by various other wares that represent different in-game items. The later variations switch the cat out for a more jolly old man, but he's still a recognizable shopkeeper thanks to that big huge bag of swords and potions dangling from his jacket. Since he's not actually a playable character, you could argue that the final species choice and design for the shopkeeper doesn't really matter, but if you're trying to build a convincing world, a convincing universe, it does make sense to pay attention to the smaller details like that. Now last up today, we've got a various bunch of the old school beta concepts and explorations by Albert Carranza. And most of the champions are basically identical to their original released forms, but it is some very interesting pieces of concept art considering how old these actually are. One of the only concepts that features maybe a more noticeable difference is the Morgana final concept, since she appears to have this glowy purple whip weapon which isn't present on the actual Morgana release version. Warwick, Zillion, and Garen on the other hand are basically indistinguishable from their in-game beta appearances, other than the change in art style of course, but it's very interesting to see these concepts from way back in the days. Albert also included some non-champion concept arts which you guys might want to check out, including the original login screen art, client screens, and in-game HUD designs. During his 3-year tenure at Riot Games, Albert also handled some of the environment meshes and textures, which is pretty insane if you think that a lot of this guy's work really laid most of the groundwork for the artistic design of the game as we know it today. Either way, that's going to be it for our scrap designs of champions. It's always cool to contrast some of the early concept ideations against the final release versions because it really provides a ton of insight into the creative process at Riot. If you guys enjoyed this one, please leave a like on it, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and looks like that's going to be it for this one, so I'll see you guys next time.